Good afternoon, everyone. I'm John King Belisai. I'm the Vice President of the National Capital Tartan Day Committee. We're the host for this Tartan Day Symposium 2023, and I'm the moderator of the symposium. This session that you're about to hear is being pre-recorded between me and my good friend and colleague Keith MacGregor, who is resident up in Connecticut, who is not able to physically be with us in DC for Tartan Day this year. But through the miracle of modern technology, we're bringing you his thoughts and comments, and we'll play them at the event. We're going to be talking about the unearthing of the so-called Dalmally stones. This is a subject which was an article, three-part article in the recent newsletter of the Council of Scottish Clans and Associations, of which I'm president, called the Claymore. And if anybody would like to have those, let me know and we'll get them to you. This subject is a culmination of a very long process, which I know Keith will describe to us. When I first met him in the 90s, we were on a MacGregor clan country tour together, had not ever met before. Both being of MacGregor descent, we were, and history buffs, very, very interested in visiting many MacGregor locations in the Highlands, both in Argyll and elsewhere. And that's how, and Keith was already into this subject, but that was the first I was hearing of it. So now you'll all have a chance to hear it from the beginning. We're talking about I guess, almost 30-year process you've gone through, right, Keith?
All right.
Okay, it's all yours. Take it away.
Well, hi, I'm Keith MacGregor, a longtime friend of John Belisai's, and both of us, of course, members of the Clan Gregor Society of Scotland. Many years ago, we got interested, Richard MacGregor and I, who you can see on the page here, became very interested in some documents we'd come across from people saying that at one time, the church at Dalmally in mid-Argyll, Scotland, had some interesting stones lying about in the churchyard, which locals were saying belonged to the MacGregor chiefs. We had no other proof at that point. And so what I did was to actually go to the church, walked in the door, and out of just sheer serendipity, I picked up a small pamphlet by Mary MacGregor, who was a local in the Glen, whose grandfather actually was Charles MacGregor, who founded the British Army Corps, Medical Corps. In that, Mary was a storyteller, and the very first story I came across was that, yes, indeed, the MacGregor stones were here, strewn about, and that they were of the MacGregor chiefs. Not a bad start for a treasure hunt, is what I thought to myself. 24 or 26 years later, we are now currently involved in mounting those stones inside of Dalmally Church, very near to the chiefs to whom they belong. And so here's a very down-to-earth tale of how we got from there to here. Okay, change. In a very bad picture, I apologize for that. These are the MacGregor Glens in mid-Argyll. It's the top of Loch Awe, and we're looking at Glenorchy and Glen Stray at the moment. This is the homelands of the MacGregors, as far as I can determine, for easily 1,000 years. Let's call it that. It's an awful nice picture. In the lower right-hand corner, you, of course, have Kilhern Castle, symbol of Campbell power, which was to come along at some point in the game. So let's go on from here. So it's an aerial of Dalmally. As you can see, it's pretty rugged territory. Those are the mountains at the top of the picture. And in the lower right, you have Dalmally Church, which is kind of the central point for all that's about to happen here. So that's the lay of the land. This was all, as I say, once the MacGregor homelands. Okay. Now, I'd like to talk to you for a minute about the styles of stone carving that were going on in Scotland in the 12 and 1300s. Here we are at Iona, and these are the sort of the oversized warrior stones. It's called the Iona School of Carving. This is what you see a considerable amount of at Iona. These are McKinnon and MacDonald chiefs primarily, who were associated with founding Iona. And they're very large and they're very impressive. They're sort of two-dimensional, but they certainly have the story. You can see the MacDonald galley on the stone at the left. And these were, in fact, the sort of the best of the best. These were what the high chiefs of MacDonald and several others who buried on Iona got. Okay, this is Whithorn. Now, Whithorn was always an ecclesiastical center in the southwest of Scotland. And these are ecclesiastical stones. All of these would have been for chiefs, not chiefs, I'm sorry, for priests or ministers, depending on the age. These are very old. You're looking at 700, 800 right here. So even before the school we're going to talk about next. Okay, aha. Now you see something a little different. These are in fact the Dalmally stones, only these are at Kilmartin. They're very similar. They're not the actual Dalmally stones, I shouldn't say that, but these are the similar stones to the ones we'll be talking about in Dalmally. Unfortunately, they've been sandblasted before some people knew any better, and that's why they're all this dull gray color. But what's very important about this school of carving, which we're going to call the Loch Awe School, because we're now at the foot of Loch Awe in Kilmartin, is that they're far in excess of sophistication from anything we've seen or had seen in this area of Scotland. As you can see, there's Celtic knotwork. There are symbols for various things, some of which to this day, we don't know what they mean. The cross at the top of the left-hand stone. And they tell a story. Each of these stones tells quite a story. You have a sword representing a warrior. You have a galley on the right, again, representing a seagoing warrior. And then you have these figures in the centers or in a panel in each of the stones. These are warrior figures. And we'll have more about that in a minute, but consider that not everybody had one of these. They cost a fortune. And then consider that a warrior stone is a very rare thing. So that's the beginning. What happens here now? Well, let's see what happens here now. Could we go to the next slide? Here's what happens here now. These are the Knights Templar, in case anybody was wondering. And what we have here is a whale of a tale. We have in 1307, Philip the Fair of France owing gobs of money to the Templars, as did almost every kingdom in Europe. And Philip was broke. He also had his puppet Pope in Avignon at the time. And he got the Pope in 1307 to outlaw the French Templars. This, of course, is the story of Friday the 13th. He rounded up about 140 Templars that he was able to catch, but with their intelligence, most of the Templars were long gone. And when Philip came to the treasury, the Templar treasury in Paris, the cupboard was bare. So the treasure was gone, and so were most of the Templars. This is where the story gets murky, because you have every kingdom in Europe, including England, under orders from the Pope to exterminate the Templars. However, there were several places where that was not the case. And the one we're going to talk about is where we just were, Kilmartin Glen in Scotland. Turns out when Robert Bruce killed Red Cummin in the Greyfriars Dumfries Church, he was excommunicated by the Pope, Bury Sam I. When that happened, he, of course, himself was an outlaw, and it was another reason for Edward of England to come after him. We estimate now that quite a few Templars came to Kilmartin. Whether there was a treasure or not, we may never know. The point being that here they were in a new country, staying undercover, and they, we believe now, are the originators of the Loch Awe School of Carving. They brought it with them. I'll do a little side note for everyone here, just so we understand all this. You either believe the Templar story, there's two camps. You either believe it or you don't. And we have the famous tale of the third day at Bannockburn, when the battle is still hanging in the balance, and you have the small folk coming over the hill on the third day. Well, the small folk in this case are reputed to be the Templars in disguise, who then threw off their garments, their rags, showing, of course, their white Templar tunic and their red cross. The reason I bring this up is because on that day, Edward's cavalry turned and ran. And this was the breaking point in the Battle of Bannockburn. Why they ran? Well, that's what this is about. Would 100 Templars or more coming over the hill make a difference? We can argue about that for a good long time, but I did want to bring them up for two reasons. One, Bannockburn, but two, the Lochawe School. Okay, let's go on. Right, so here we are at a small country church, Dalmally Kirk in Dalmally Glen. This is the third church. It was built by William Johnson in about 1811. It's an octagonal church with a bell tower, and there were about 11 of these in Scotland. This is the epicenter for what we want to talk about. The first church, we can go up one. The first church was built by the MacGregors in the medieval period. And of course, what everyone knows is that the higher born people are buried inside the church. The floors are made of dirt. It's just what's done. In fact, the really highborn are buried close to the east altar, the pre-Reformation altar. So here we are, just before the fireworks, searching for the Dalmally stones. This is a MacGregor gathering in 2011, and sure as shooting, you're looking at two of the stones that we will be dealing with shortly. It's an interesting picture because it was a treasure hunt for some of these people. We spent the whole day combing the yard, pulling up sod, and everyone just hoping to find, that next stone in the sequence. Originally, as you'll see in a minute, we think there were 12, but we'll get to how many we've actually rescued in a minute. Interestingly, that's Jamie MacGregor, dead center, and his lovely family, who is Mary MacGregor's son and also MSP for the area. Okay. We also got lucky, hugely lucky, on another point. What you're looking at is an obituary that was kept by none other than James MacGregor, Dean of Lismore, in the late 14 and early 1500s. He was not only the most learned man of the area in Argyll and Perthshire, he was also a notary. And as a notary, he would see and would notarize all the transactional documents, including money, including property for the area. That would include the MacGregors, the Buchanans, the Campbells, notably, and any other tribes in the area. What he did brilliantly, and why we owe him so much, is he kept the obituaries along with a collection of oral tradition poems from the bards from the days of no writing in Scotland, and he kept them in their original form so that you can hear what the bards would say to the chiefs, who of course were paying them to say nice things about them. They're very interesting. Watson's book, Bardac Almanac, is a terrific little read if you want to see what a bard did 700 years ago. So here was our stroke of luck. As you can see, what John MacGregor did, and he would have known at least 5 of these people in his own lifetime, of the 12 people that we're talking about, the chiefs, would have personally known them. So you can't get much better documentation. And as you can see, he records one. Let's look at the first one in, which is very famous MacGregor, actually, John the One-Eyed, Ian Cam. And he says, oops, can we go back one for a second? Yeah, you see that first entry, he's buried in Dysart. Dysart is, in fact, Dalmally, on the north side of the high altar in the year 1390. It is very, very rare that you get that kind of in situ description of a burial that long ago. And we, as I say, we owe the Dean greatly in his wisdom, really, to record them. So there's our first chief known to be buried inside the pre-Reformation church. Then you have Gregor MacIancam, whom I believe myself and whom John and a number of MacGregors descend from. He is the fourth chief, actually. And we go down the line. Here's his brother John. Interestingly, they both die in 1415. Some conjecture is it was from the plague. We come down, we have Malcolm in 1440, Patrick, 1461. These are, in fact, the documented chiefs. We have surnames and we have writing by this time in Scotland, documented chiefs of the MacGregors. Go to the next one. Here's just the rest of them. I know it's a bit hard to read and it's blurry, but we have burials going up till April, was it 13 in 1528. That is the last recorded burial. We don't know why the dean stopped, because he was still alive until 1550. Some conjecture is that we, in our conflicts with the Campbells, which were rising at this period of time, we may not have buried here after this. Dalmally was ground zero for what Black Duncan Campbell of the Cowal called the MacGregor Wars, and they went on forever, hundreds of years. So that's the chiefs, the 12 chiefs that we're looking for. And what we're really looking for, of course, are their monuments. Okay, Sam? Here's an eyewitness account, several actually, that we have from the travelers who would roam the countryside. We have a Thomas Pennant in a 1769 tour, where he notes several gravestones of great antiquity with figures of a warrior furnished with a spear or two-handed sword, and representations of a chase, and other elegant fretwork are said to be part of a coffin of a MacGregor. He got it right. He really did get it right. And he's the first one who really kind of sort of lays it out. Now we had more than clues, we had documentation. We have a Thomas Brydale in 1897, who really kicks things off when he makes sketches of the known 7 slabs. You notice we've gone from 12 to 7 here, found either in or near church. And he has confirmed somewhere on the north side of the east end of the church. Remember, that in the pre-Reformation period, the altars were always in the east, and in the Reformation, of course, they were switched to the west. So this is great, because now we had corroboration for what we had been reading in the Dean much earlier, and it was clear that some of the hints we'd received were true. Okay, so here we are. Naturally, as I said, this was a treasure hunt, and when those people you just saw went rooting around the yard, it was pretty easy to find these stones with reference to Pennant and Brydale. The sketch on the right is a side slab from a raised coffin, and it is that is Brydale's sketch. So there's number 1 that we're seeking. We go again. Sam? This is one of the most intricate of all, and if you remember what we just saw down in Kilmartin, this is a warrior stone. The fretwork and the embroidering on this is of, as I said, of a sophistication not seen anywhere else in Scotland. We have the Celtic knotwork, the legendary Celtic knotwork on the lower 2/3 of the stone, with a wolf, and his head is in the mouth of a dog under the moon. So we have a hunting scene here. But you'll notice also that, as described, the warrior is there in his own panel with his spear and his sword. This becomes important. That's one of the finest. You'll see it in a
Hey, Keith, can I ask a question at this point?
Absolutely.
I think I know the answer to this, but why were the stones thrown down and over time ended up being obscured by the mud and the grass and everything? Were they purposefully thrown down by the Campbells or reformist congregation or what?
You've got it right, John. In 1611-12, Black Duncan Campbell of the Cowell, arguably the worst Campbell that ever was, if you're a MacGregor, decided that he was going to rebuild the church to assert his power in the Glen. We already had Kilhern Castle built in 1432 as a symbol of the Campbell fist in the Glen, but he decided that the church was ruined and he was going to rebuild it in his image. Now, the first thing they did in pre-Reformation Scotland, in post-Reformation Scotland, was to destroy the pre-Reformation altar. It was simply done. They would break it. The workmen were known to break them disrespectfully, and probably anybody nearby, and then to bury them right on the spot, thereby burying the old religion. We believe that's what happened because in 1560, miraculously, you're in a land of all highland clans who are all Catholic. Let's remember that. Suddenly, the Earl of Argyll, Campbell, gets religion and switches the Campbells over to Protestant while John Knox is preaching there. This immediately gives them license to kill. And this is really where things got very nasty in the Highlands, and particularly between the MacGregors and the Campbells, whom we had married in previous centuries, by the way, and they had married us. This is where things went south. So with that, it's pretty well known that he removed the stones and either stacked them or threw some of them in the yard. He may have left a few in place. And then, of course, Johnson's workmen, who were not particularly highly praised, would have thrown the rest out when they built the third church in 1811. So it's a long story of these stones journeying away from the graves of the chiefs that they were covering and going in various degrees out to the yard. With that, we get people in the late 1700s and 1800s appropriating these stones, that is, putting them on their own graves. And that's why they're not anywhere near where they're supposed to be. And that's what caused us to have to hunt for them. Interestingly, as you'll see a little later, we have the families, we know who appropriated the stones, which we had to prove, in fact, to Historic Environment Scotland before we could move them. So that's the short answer, John, the Reformation. Here's another one, as you can see. First of all, you can see it's been bastardized on the bottom. Somebody tried to make their own carving, which does not help the quality of the stone. But here you have your warrior panel once again. It's important to remember that we believe these are carved by the Templars. There are stories about them having a manual, an actual manual of the stones they could carve. Of course, this went on for hundreds of years, so it wasn't the original Templars at that point, but their offspring, if it's true. But what you could do was tell the person's life story by the panels you chose. And these were not cheap, by the way. Only the highborn were really going to get something like this. To this day, none of us can figure out what that circle is with the X through it at the top. It's not exactly Christian. It's not exactly the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, but it is something obviously very important because it got its own panel. Then you have the Celtic knotwork below that. Then you have the warrior. There's some other knotwork that's worn away on the sides of the warrior. And then you have the problem at the bottom. So the stone, which was lying next to the other very intricate stone, were two of the big finds that we come across. Okay. And here's another one. Again, you can see the warrior and the hunt. This was clearly, we are out in the Argyll Hills, and hunting was extremely important. You had to be a warrior and a hunter. And this was actually put on a MacGregor grave. This is the only one where that upright is also for the same grave. And it's a Donald MacGregor appropriating the stone, which he must have known was MacGregor, and putting it on the grave of his 16-year-old son. This was the one that really cinched it, because now we could say, yes, the stones were moved. They're not where they were, and clearly the stone in the ground is not of the same era as the upright. Okay, Sam? Last one, same idea. There's a larger warrior in this one. We don't know if the size of it meant anything, but it's what's comes through loud and clear is of the 7 we found, all 7 possess the warrior image. We think that's very significant. That would be a chief. Okay. Just 2 more just to show you when it ends. We have 1519 is a very interesting one. John MacGregor, one of the great leaders of the clan. Again, he was carried back to Dysart from far away. And we have this ominous thing of the Dean recording on which day a great meteor was seen in Glenorchy. Well, of course, meteors were considered bad luck. And that's just about what was around the corner for these MacGregor chiefs. But we'll go on. We'll go on. 2 more. Here's the last one, 1528. John MacGregor McEwen, captain of the castle of Glenstray. So we have the obits. Here's the archaeology that followed. This is where we went next. Can go ahead, Sam. Ground penetrating radar. I had not seen this stuff before 2012, and I certainly got into it rather quickly. Okay, can we go on? We'll jump right through here. This is Ollie O'Grady. He's one of the top GPR operators in Scotland. What we decided to do was to GPR the entire church, knowing that there were burials there. It's just a wood floor, and a GPR goes down several meters, putting signals into the ground, which send back images, as you're going to see in a moment. Thanks to Ollie. Here's me trying my hand at Sam with Ollie recording the locations as the GPR moves along. There are machines now that are so good you can actually wear one on your wrist and do this, but this was a little while ago. Okay, this is our chairman, Richard, who's also my partner in this venture, explaining what we're finding under the entranceway to Sir Malcolm and Lady MacGregor, which it was news to them, actually. It was very interesting. And as you can see, they're listening intently. Okay. So here's the gist of it. This is B7. This is the central grid in the entranceway. Entranceway is only about 18 by 15 feet, maybe a little bit bigger than that. And what you're looking at is the most important, probably, of all the reads that we got. If we can go on here, I'll show you why. Look very carefully. This is from the side, by the way. This is what the GPR can give you for a picture. You'll notice there are 2 long curves right in the center in B7 that are next to each other, but they don't connect. It's believed by the experts, by HES, that these were the original pre-Reformation altar, which was broken in half and buried. This is one of the most exciting things, actually, that we were able to detect with the GPR. Lairs or graves would be less likely to see because, unfortunately, with acidic Scottish soil, Scotland, we're not terribly sure how much of a body would remain at 700 years. Okay. Probably the most important 2 slides are these 2. This is what the GPR saw. We're standing in the east entranceway. North is to the right. And what you see are, as we have written on top here, this was Ollie's prognosis, was that these were, in fact, the burial sites. This is where the stones would have been on the altar. You can see the dark black blotch, sort of lower middle, going to the left and right. Those would be the altar. And there's possibly one of the burials described as to the north of the altar, right next to it. We think that possibly this was the most important chief because nearer to the god, nearer to the altar was their way of looking at that. We're at 1.404 meters. They didn't bury very deeply. Enough maybe to keep the wolves away, maybe not. But this is where we got one of our 2 best readings. If you go on to the next slide, this is just another verification. This is 1.89 meters. And these are the two indicators of graves inside the church. Right where the dean put them, right? He had 3 to the north, that's to the right, the altar in the middle, and 5 or 6 to the south. This is the kind of indisputable evidence that we presented to Historic Environment Scotland. This is where they got their eyes lit up, and I think they were very pleased to see this kind of corroboration. You don't get this anywhere, really, where you can actually point to something that someone's written about hundreds of years ago. Right, there it is. That's the most important picture. We think that this is what the church, the medieval church built by the MacGregors must have looked like. It's built at the same period. This is Craig Nish. It's a little bit down the peninsula, the Kintyre Peninsula. And it's, as you can see, raised coffins, both sides. The altar would have been right at the end. And of course, you see all the burials in front of the altar. Exactly what we discovered at Dalmally. This one was not disturbed. And there's a sort of a sad story that goes along with this, in that this church was abandoned, which means that the Church of Scotland, which is even today going through these problems, does not have the funds to keep the small country churches open. And what they will do in some cases like this, where there's no one attending and very few people around, they'll just let it go. As you can see, the roof has been removed, but the graves are there. As I said, they buried as close to God as they could, and that was in the floor of the church. You'll see that everywhere in Scotland. But here we have proof. Let's go on one, Sam, if we would. Here we have a raised stone coffin, exactly as described in the Dean. And look at the fretwork on the side. It matches the fretwork that we saw in Dalmally. Very clear that this is of the same period as the Dalmally stones. Okay. This is Craig Nish. Just wanted you to see the east-facing original altar. It's beautiful in a way, but it's equally as sad, because this could be the fate of a number of these small country churches in Scotland over the next few years. Right, okay, well, on to business. In July of this past summer, 2022, after 22 years of collecting donations, and we did collect in essence of 90,000 pounds, I have to say, our MacGregor people were very good about donating. They realized the gravity of what we were talking about. And we are using the best stone conservators in Scotland. We have Derek and Will here on their bums digging it out, while Richard and I and Hendrik are standing around watching. I shouldn't say it that way. We did our share too. But this was, in fact, a 7-day adventure. We had to be, obviously, when you're lifting stones like this, you need to be very careful. Interestingly, the two uprights right next to it were McIntyre stones. And the stone behind it is a McIntyre stone. So we have good reason to believe that the appropriators of these stones, of which there are 3 in a row, were indeed McIntyres, just for the record. We got very lucky. We got some press. Yeah, that's fine. We got some press. You can go on. This is Will and Derek lifting one of them. You can see it takes a hoist. Average weight of the stones were about 650 pounds, and we had one that was 812 pounds. Not the kind of thing you want to mess with yourself. So this is what conservation means. This is what we paid considerable amount of money to get done. And this is the raising of the Dalmally stones.
Keith, we're about 30 minutes into this, and I think we're going to have to start winding it up.
Okay. We're there.
I had a question for you at this point. And you and I know this, but I think a lot of folks listening to this may not know it. Unlike a lot of Highland clans, the MacGregors don't have castles and other buildings. that they can go to as part of the old clan lands and reconnect with their heritage. So these sorts of carvings now unearthed that can be viewed by the public, by people in the clan and others, become very, very important to us MacGregors. You talk a bit about what you see happening going forward, because you put a lot of effort and money into this project. These are now up. They're, as I understand it, available to be viewed. Where do we stand with this project?
Okay, great question, John. Incidentally, those are the two stones that I was showing off in the tour several slides back. Right, here's what has to happen. They have to be cleaned and desalinated and patched up, cemented. We could hold right there for a minute, Sam. This is a good place to sit. They have to be restored, and then of course carefully brought back to Dalmally. What we achieved in those 24 years of petitions and such was permission from the Church of Scotland to move the stones back into the church. We also had to get permission and money from Historic Environment Scotland. So with all parties on board, including the church elders, that is the object of this exercise. We hope to, in early summer this year, bring these stones completely restored back into the church and to mount them around the church itself. There's no room in the actual entranceway, since it is the entranceway. So we're basically setting them up. It'll be museum quality lighting. It'll be plaques telling you what you're looking at. Setting them up inside the church in all the alcoves right around the church. And from that point on, they'll be as close to the chiefs they actually belong to as is physically possible, some 20 to 30 feet away, if you will. By doing this, these are A-listed monuments, and they will, in fact, be very hard to dislodge. When it's A-listed and HES knows that, they will tend to not want anything happening to that church. Very important, because there are actually 6 people in the congregation at this point. So there's the prize right there. This is what it once looked like, courtesy of, we think, of the Templars. And these stones will be our monuments forever. Even Rob Roy's stone, by the way, is not his. It's been recarved 4 different times. That's our only other physical monument for the MacGregors. And his was reused other times. It was probably a celebratory thing honoring a warrior. These were actually made for our chiefs, our first chiefs.
So I would think the Church of Scotland is quite pleased with where you are with this project, because it means they'll be able to bring tourists and others into the Dalmally Kirk to see these stones, and also, I'm sure, make a little donation to Church of Scotland on the way out the door, right?
Yes, it goes to the congregation actually, and then they have it for maintenance. Here's the problem very quickly. They don't have the money to maintain these churches. They're making everything regional now. I'm not knocking them. I realize it's out of necessity. But a church like this, without external support by people like Clan Gregor, who will be bringing a tour, for instance, in 2024 of about 170 people here to donate, without that kind of external support and community support from the Glen, that means this church is no longer just a church. It's a community gathering area. They are talking about putting in a small kitchen so they can cater and carry on community affairs as well as church whenever they are able to get a minister. So you have an A-listed building with A-listed monuments being supported by, frankly, Clan Gregor and probably Historic Scotland in a pinch. But the problem is if the Church of Scotland decides they can't afford it, what then? This is a problem, as I say, going on all over Scotland right now.
This has been fascinating, not only to me, but I'm sure to our entire audience. And we're going to want to watch very carefully what happens going forward, because in a sense, this is not the end of the story. It's maybe the end of the beginning of the story. So are there any concluding remarks you'd like to make? Because I think we have a time crunch at this point.
No, and I really appreciate John being able to tell this story to others who may be looking at similar situations for their clans. This is the final plaque we installed on a lectern, which we also donated to the church. Kind of makes it a little more permanent. We put that in 2011. And it's just nice to see. The Bible sits on top of it. So we thought that was a cute touch. But no, this is the project that we've been working on a long time. And thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much, Keith.